London and turn myself on these days. What's going on? What? Behave yourself. Right. Oh yes, hi. Right, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Watching at home on Periscope. Hang on, just a minute.
You need to go up, or you need to crouch, Roy.
Okay.
That's it.
There we are. I adopt the position when I normally speak to doctors. It's half genuflection. I say, yes, doctor. Anyway, I now need an osteopath, actually. It's great to see you all. Thank you very much for watching. We've got a fantastic guest tonight coming up. But first of all, let's have a word from our fabulous sponsors. It's the wonderful, I can't believe she's here, straight from Las Vegas. It's Natalie. Come on, Natalie. Come and say a word from the sponsors. Yeah.
Oh, Natalie, stand a bit further back,
Natalie,
please. No, I haven't got a chart. That's it.
No, sorry.
Come into the centre.
No. Further back. Do you mind standing over here, Natalie?
No, come on, Natalie. Come in front of there. That's perfect. You're lovely.
Natalie, stand in front of my logo, not your company logo.
You're making me try and stand in front of my back.
Head of
I'd just like
branding.
to welcome everybody this evening, particularly James. Very much looking forward to a fantastic health chat again, Roy, as usual. Especially on this historic evening with Article 50 being triggered today.
Absolutely, we're all out now.
So no pressure
Yes.
to follow Theresa May today.
Yes, we're all out.
Yeah.
It's going to be all right.
So,
Yeah.
welcome. Looking
Yes.
forward to it.
Natalie, there's nothing like a great speech from a sponsor, and
that
there's
was
nothing
nothing
like
like
a
it.
great speech.
That's right.
Round of applause for Natalie. It's lovely to see you, and thank you very much. And of course, there are other sponsors who are Salix, which they're open the door, John, so they can hear me saying thank you. So, oh, he's here. Angus is here. Salix, who are running our front of house and have been our friends since we very first started. So, thank you very much for your help. Right, so we're going to have a look tonight at primary care. My own view is it's finished, and we're probably better off moving it all into hospital. Much more convenient. You can park, it's open, and they can do tests and things, and you can go home knowing what's wrong with you. Much better, but there is somebody else that takes an alternative. Thank God for that. Here he is, without his knighthood. It's James Kingsland.
Hooray!
It's very nice to see you, James. Thank you very much. Oh dear. Right, let's do the SOP test first of all.
Sartorial,
No.
elegant.
Dull.
No. What do you
Like
think?
me.
No. Yeah, they do. They match my eyes, actually. So you know, but you've got a nice tie on, James.
Yeah, this was bought under the influence in Edinburgh Airport. You remember well.
I do,
You got me
yeah.
under the influence as well. We got out to do a talk in Crieff, but never quite got there. Or
No, we went to a place called Crieff, which is in Scotland, which is almost inaccessible, really. You fly into an airport in Scotland, one of them, I don't know which one it is, and they pick you up. We won't tell you which company it is because they get very pissed off when we tell this story, but it was a pharmaceutical company. They had plenty of money. And they picked us up in this lavish car, and we were chauffeur driven to this Crieff Hydra. Is it a Hydra? Very expensive hotel, and we arrived at lunchtime, and we had a very nice lunch and a bottle of claret, you know, and we were supposed to go up there and do a double act. Anyway, so they started, and the managing director went on first, and he went on and on and on, and then he went through the finances, the numbers, the marketing plan, and it just went on and on and on. And I said to James, if we don't get on soon, we haven't got enough time to get in the car to get back to the airport to catch our flight, and we both needed to be back that night. So the guy went on and on, and why are you late?
They found it.
Eh? You got a note from your mum.
Yeah.
And he went, and anyway, so we said to the conference producer, I'm very sorry, we've got to go now. And he said, but you haven't been on. I said, no, but we've got to get back to the airport. So they took us back in a very lavish car and to the airport, where our flight was delayed. So we never spoke. Word. The flight was delayed, and this is it. We ended up in the bar, and we thought in Scotland, what do you do in Scotland? You could only have a whiskey tasting in Scotland. So we had a whiskey tasting, and James.
then you forced me to board this. I couldn't remember when I got it.
He was wearing an awful tie, very vulgar tie at the time. But so now he's got his tie. Anyway,
The story of Crieff.
I
My
know.
tie.
Yes.
I've still got it.
It is jolly nice too. Well, listen, thank you for coming to be our guest. We've been after getting you to come and talk for a long time now. Dates are always very difficult. let's talk about you. What got you into why be a doctor? It wasn't in your family, was it?
No, well, there's a history of nursing, the noble profession,
Yeah.
and probably it should say the National Association of Primary Care just last week have moved into the RCN, so we've found our home within primary care. But my mum was a nurse. She still thinks she is, but she's in nursing.
So have you
My
moved
wife's a
out of
nurse
those
and-
lovely quaint offices around the corner?
Yeah.
What, the one with the mousetrap and all that?
We've moved to the home of primary care. Yeah, yeah, we're in the RCN now.
Really?
You were in there today, this morning.
Yeah, I
Well,
did.
I know your memories.
No, but I
troubling
didn't.
you, but you were there this
I
morning.
didn't know that you'd got offices.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh, I see. Really? Will you be out on strike with the nurses with a 1% pay rise?
No. We'll be supporting them. No, but so there was some history of medicine, but it was interesting that I remember at my interview for medical school, I said, why medicine? You were never expecting that question. And even at that time, we're talking about leadership and who inspired you. And as a Nottingham lad, of course, I came with, at the time, it was the late 70s, Brian Clough.
Brian Clough, yeah.
And Dr Duncan, who was the first medical officer for health. The medical school at Liverpool where I went is called the Duncan Building. And I also said then, and Dr Duncan Waring. It was a bit risky.
Was it Eddie Waring's brother?
No, it was Robin Nedwell from the Doctor at Sea, Doctor on the Go, Doctor in the
Carry
House.
on, Doctor.
Yeah. And
That's where
watching
it's got his
TV.
bedside manner from.
That was it, so,
episodes of Carry On.
There was a teenager, there was the TV programme, God rest him, he did about 2 or 3 years ago. Robin Nedwell was sort of a bit of a hero, and I thought I'd try it at medical school interview, which was a lead balloon moment, but anyway, I'm here to tell the story. But so Dr Duncan Waring, but it was a combination of interest, maybe some family influence. Dr Duncan Waring came together, and at the time when you're in your formative years, you thought, well, what would be right for the future? And the rest is history. So I went to Liverpool University and qualified in '84. I know it's hard to believe. You look so young, but 84. Yeah.
I was running a proper business then.
All right.
Yes.
You mean you ever
Yeah.
did that?
So you,
no idea.
You were
ever did that?
1984, and you were at Liverpool. And then where'd you go then?
Yeah, well, I started off with junior hospital posts in the Royal Liverpool Hospital, and interestingly, winding forward now, I'm a non-exec director of the hospital, and there's still people coming up saying, I remember when you were a houseman. It's amazing, there's some continuing hospital services as well. Did a bit of surgery, some university lecturing, but then saw the light. And there was a moment in time when I remember being on an ENT ward and the consultant saying, this patient's got a rash, get the dermatologist. And I was saying, well, I'm a doctor, I know what that is, it's eczema. Don't get the right people in. And there was a sense of, my brother's in a specialist area, and he's sort of got to, this is the joust we have between specialists and generalists, or generalists and marginalists, or partialists, is that, you started to know more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing. Whereas my brother would say, yeah, you know less and less about more and more, you know nothing about everything. Yeah. So there was a sense of I wanted to still use the skill set that was taught an undergraduate, the generalist, and there was lots of other reasons, but I started to think about doing generalist medicine. I went into GP vocational training, moved to the Wirral for some of the training posts, and then got a partnership in Wallasey on the Riviera of the Mersey. You'll know it well.
Yeah, I do a bit.
We look over the Mersey. And
Well,
anyone from Liverpool here? All right. Oh, of course, yeah. Got the big river to keep all the caps.
No hubcap is safe.
So yes, I live on the Wirral now, but we still think as yourselves.
So, but I mean, it's easy just to kind of gloss over that. You became a partner, but I mean, I suppose really it was the only way in. Was it in those days, or because I mean, these days it's very hard to find young doctors who want to be partners. Never mind have the wherewithal to become a partner.
No, it was at a time when applications for partnership, you would have 20, 30 applicants. Yeah. You would go through a rigorous interview process. It was quite an achievement to get a partnership in the early stages of being fully qualified. I was offered this partnership in Wallasey, which within a year the two senior partners had left, Sadly, the chap who I went into, who in his own words had said he'd been a bit fossilised and was really excited now about changing the service, which we started at an early stage of developing primary care from our general practice space. And sadly he died.
Was that the practice? That's not the practice you've got now, is it?
Yeah, yeah. So
it's the same practice, because it's an enormous place now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I became senior partner when I was 30,
really?
with 2 senior partners who'd retired, another partner who died, and a part-time lady partner, and it was sink or swim then. So you learned both the delivery against the contract, the requirements of your registered population, the business of delivering a contractor service very quickly.
Yeah. But you were on the soft side of the Mersey, aren't you? Really up there. You were in the knobby end.
Depends. East of the M53, I wouldn't go out somewhere at night in some of those areas. No, we've got the variance. I remember the chief executive of the PCT. I've never been anywhere without saying, when you're delivering new care, but we've got some special deprivation. And we have in the Wirral. We've got some real deprivation in Birkenhead and Wallasey areas. But I've never been anywhere without, we've got something very specific and unusual. So where I work, we've got a mix.
How many docs are there now? How many docs you got there now?
We've got 4 in partnership, 2 in associate positions, and we usually have 3 in training at any one time.
So about 10,000 population?
No, we've only got 6,000.
4 doctors and 6,000. That's over-doctored.
No, it's not. That is same-day access, urgent access, pre-bookable access. We are the never full practice.
You could probably deliver their linctus.
Good business.
That's outrageous. 4 doctors for 6,000 people.
Why is good supply of service,
excuse me,
no wait, immediate access, outrageous? I thought that's what our patients say. They want responsive care, accessible care.
You must know all your patients by name. You send them all a birthday card.
Of course we do. That's what personalised list-based practice does.
It's great if you can do it. But,
we're not unique.
Can you make it pay?
Yes, enough. Yeah, to afford the ties that you get me when I'm drunk.
I tell you what, I am interested in exploring with you, because you were, joking aside, I mean, you were ahead of the game with what you added to the practice, didn't you? Because you had citizens' advice in there and all kinds of counselling services. I mean, I think you took a view very early on about the holistic nature of general practice. Where did that come from?
Well, I went into practice as a partner in 1989. 1990, we created the internal market. The first flush of the internal market, we had fund holding, then multi-funds, and requirements for people who deployed the resource, who wrote the prescriptions or made the referrals, to be accountable for the resource. That's what we're trying to get back to today. But at that stage, if you started to analyse your general surgery, you realised that quite quickly the training I had couldn't deliver against individuals or your population's health need. You needed a different model of care. And by 1992, I was writing about something called the Aladdin model of general practice, new work for old. We could take on, and certainly I could do a lot of the work that was being done routinely in medical outpatients, but I was being overloaded with work that I wasn't really well qualified to do. Things where people who needed care, but their care was related to situational disturbance, relationship breakup, financial difficulties that cause depression. Things that would be better delivered from another healthcare professional, people coming in having had a whiplash injury, the police saying you better go and get checked by a GP when they needed a physiotherapist. But I then had to transact with a physiotherapist to get the right care. So in the early stages of having a budget, we were saying if we were going to purchase services for that registered population, we knew that population and there was a low turnover, you could start to deliver the workforce that would be the right care at first contact. Hence we started to look at bringing in citizen advice, third sector at that stage, bringing in, it wasn't Age UK at the, before the, what were they called?
Help the Aged.
Help the Aged. So we had those sort of services in, and then building specifically where we got the profile, mental health services. Because when we analysed our average consultation, we were seeing that 40% of all consultations had a significant psychological or psychiatric problem, 40%. And we were delivering it with general practice. We were just starting to get practice nursing and an administrative team.
That was really the the fund holding enabled that, didn't it? Really.
Yes, it was a vehicle.
You,
It wasn't
had,
the right
no,
vehicle.
I mean, you had the thinking about it, and you were visionary enough to see the holistic interconnection there is between causality and modality. I get that, but it was also, I think, I mean, I'm wondering really whether or not fund holding was really the halcyon days of being in general practice. Do you think that's true?
Well, most would say it was fun, and can we bring back the fun of fund holding, not the particular aspects that weren't sometimes helpful, where we had compartmentalised budgets and there was perverse incentive to shift work around the system, and that one of the reasons why the Blair government got rid of it, and understandably so. But the principles of aligning your clinical decision making with the resources that were deployed, and could you make better use of the resource. So I remember for our mental health team, we were given the budget for outpatient psychiatry, which was £15,000, and we were using it to buy services from the consultant psychiatrist.
It's
for
£3
whatever.
each for all your patients.
Yeah. It was early 90s, so we said, well, would we be better to buy different types of services? So we bought clinical psychology time, a range of counselling. I started to learn that counselling was not a generic specialty. There was a whole range of different expertise. Occupational therapy, I found out that occupational therapists were good at mental health services, anger management, group therapies, social network therapies, that some of our patients with severe and enduring mental health problems needed. So we built the right team against that population's health need. We started to identify those people who had fallen out of contact with health services and were being managed by the police or the church, but we weren't doing anything, and they were then ending up in hospital in crisis, and building a service that ultimately, fast forwarding over 2 to 3 years, we didn't make a referral to psychiatry for 3 years. We had people who needed occasional inpatient stay, but we were managing the healthcare need, particularly the severe and enduring mental health services, within practice, which started then to get noticed, and of course then you go for the awards.
Well, that was very groundbreaking then, wasn't it?
Well, at one stage we demonstrated the reintegration of patients with schizophrenia back into their community as a programme on a small population size, but it demonstrated a process that was reproducible. And we went in for an international award, which I think the Southern Health Board of Sweden won. They were the best at integrating patients with schizophrenia, and the runners-up was St Hilary Brow Group Practice in Wallasey. I think America came third.
You'd be very proud of it.
Yeah, so it was the start of the journey into.
Do you have any kind of evaluation of all that, or outcome data of that? Or?
Yes, I don't throw anything away. So some of the aspects of improving efficiency. And the one thing about fund holding, whilst we don't want to return to any former reform, but learning from what worked, and so for the budgets that were managed by fund holding practices, and of course we had about 55% of practices in that particular model, that there was a 4% efficiency gain on the resources that were used year on year, and your budget was based on your outturn. So when you saved your 4%, that was taken away and your budget was reduced, but year 2 you still produced a 4% return. If we were producing 4% returns on budgets at the moment, we'd have solved the 22 billion gap, I think.
Well, Simon would be delighted if the NHS could turn in 4%, wouldn't he? We were nowhere near it.
Well, it was the first taste of clinicians.
Because it was Simon
budgets.
that ended all this, because he, at the time, Simon Stevens was Tony Blair's advisor. Then he invented primary care trusts, and that came crashing down, didn't it?
Fund holding wasn't the right model.
What it did, I mean, in a sense, it was like the vanguards of its day, wasn't
Yes.
it? In the way that we look to vanguards now for innovation and nimble redesign, nimble service redesign, you did it then, really. I remember Paul Lambden, who of course you know well, he took a coachload of people off to a hospital and had their hips operated on one weekend. You know, there was some pretty innovative stuff going on, and and I always remember you had a great phrase that I stole from my own. I think you said that a doctor with a stethoscope and a checkbook can achieve more than a doctor with a stethoscope alone, and I think that was probably right. And I guess that's,
I remember that.
yeah. And then we went through that. What was that phase then we went through where you had practice-based commissioning with no money and no accountability? David Colin Tomei used to traipse around the country trying to persuade us that it made sense, and it clearly didn't.
But there was lots of learning from fund holding. What we went to then was recognising that the units of fund holding were too small, so the multi-fund, and then the total purchasing, which was then taking responsibility for whole population budgets rather than just compartmentalised parts of say, prescribing or scheduled care. I think
but
the Blair government did say 2 years after they'd got rid of that system, it was a little bit too early, and they tried to recreate it with practice-based commissioning, which was again bringing back indicative but whole population budgets and getting practices to work at a greater size than an individual. So there were some principles being built back into.
I never saw the point of it. It was a completely worthless policy. But what interests me really is the relation between, clearly there is a need to scale up, but on the other hand, family practice really only works if it's family practice. For me, I mean, the halcyon days of family practice, I look back very fondly on. The guy who was our family GP. Couldn't do very much, but what he did well. And I wonder really, as we're getting bigger, we're getting the multi-fund, the people joining together and federations and all the rest of it. If we're not designing the humanity out of primary care, we're not designing out the compassion in primary care, the knowing who your doctor is. I mean, I last time I saw my GP, he was in a restaurant in Albufeira in Portugal, and he was very surprised to see me because he was there with the practice manager. But I don't have any trouble getting an appointment. I can get in all right. But every time you go see a doctor, you see a different person. And last time I went, there was a child sitting there. Hello, Mr. Lilley. I don't want that. I'm a grumpy old geezer. I want to be looked after by a grumpy old geezer.
Yeah. But the nature of, and I was saying, the grumpy old geezer. The development of the system and why I'll throw this one in, the primary care home, is trying to build.
I want to come on to that.
But the organisational memory and how society has changed. Even in my career time, we've changed in the 30 years from the extended family, because in Wallasey there was still a sense of doing house calls where you'd go down streets and the doors were open and there was still grandma next door to mum. And we're not talking about post-war, we're only in the late 80s, so there was a sense of still a bit of an extended family and a different type of community. And we've quickly gone from the extended family to the nuclear family, to the single parent family, to the single sex family, and then we get a Prime Minister saying because of some of the dysfunction within that, we need to fund dysfunctional families, as opposed to having a service that starts to recognise it's got to evolve along with societal change, and building an organisational memory about what's worked and what hasn't. So the idea of having a one-to-one relationship, the single-handed practice, if you look at patient satisfaction surveys up to very recently, the highest satisfaction is in single-handed practice because of that personalised care, but it's not realistic for a delivery model.
No, I think it is, you see. I mean, that's the point I was going to come on to make. All the evidence is that the smaller single-handed practices, higher levels of satisfaction, and where you get competent docs, it's just as safe. I mean, I know there have been instances where it isn't, but I can't see really how you, on the one hand, you could say, well, yeah, that's the best model, but hey, we're going to make everything as big as, like, we're going to make it all Selfridges. And I wonder what's really happened to medical primary care leadership, really, GP leadership, that they went for years where you were doing, what was it, 92% of first contacts for less than 9% of the budget, all of that. I know, and what happened to the BLA in all of that? How did you let it get into this mess where you have to now circle the wagons to survive?
Well, as I say, we'll come to this new model, but just to say what has happened with
and you can't
not
cure
losing
a common cold.
Who can? We closed the Common Cold Centre down in about 1957 when we realised we can't do it. But that's another. The personalised agenda from this single-handed is changing. What we've not done, and you've heard it said many a time, a national health service have become a national illness service. what personalised care has done on the one-to-one, the best you can do is wait for people to get ill and then supply a service against them. And I still do that pretty well.
Well, yeah, you do, because you're hugely over-doctored. But I mean, there are parts of London. I mean, let's face it, there are parts of London where you wait to get ill and you wait to get an appointment. I mean, there are large parts of primary care, family practice, as I call it, that's clearly broken. It's on its knees.
Yeah. Well, bear with me just on the other story about why we've got to change is what we've not done.
No, we know why. What I'm interested.
What
I'm trying to.
Tell me about this based practice and population health management.
What I'm trying to explore with you is how do we get here? How do we get to the point where we simply can't do what family practice is supposed to do, and that's to practice for the family? With continuity of care, we know it's the best way of doing it, but somehow or other we've kind of surrendered and we said, well, we can't do what's best, it's got to look like Tesco's.
Well, it depends. If we want to do the prevention, the early detection, the screening work that makes us back into a national health service to keep people well and prevent the development of disease or prevent the fact that people then get ill and can see me personally. But you cannot do the analysis of the need of a population on a population of 3, 4, 5,000. If you want to prevent people being admitted to hospital or identify who's at the greatest risk of getting ill or prevent cancer or to do the early detection so we haven't got the worst 1-year survival in Europe, you've got to analyse your population.
No, I don't buy that. You're confusing mortality with survival, and we're at 9% for men, we're one of the best in Europe. I mean, the people who do those cancer numbers, I'm sure they do them with integrity, but it is confusing. It's not quite what it seems on cancer survival. But we won't go there, we'll just talk about family practice.
But that's the idea of scaling up, is to not lose the personalised service. And as soon as we started to have the group practice allowance, this was in the mid-60s, that you needed to have support for what was then a 24/7 contract. You were inevitably going to lose that one-to-one continuum to a group practice that could still supply a service to the individual, but it would not be the same person all the time.
At what
but
point,
that's been since the mid-60s.
At what point did we surrender list-based practice?
We've not surrendered it.
Well,
and the construct of the primary care home is based on list-based
practice. Okay, the construct is list-based practice, but I mean, you used to have your doctor, and then where did that go all of a sudden? Suddenly you ring up and say, I'd like to see, Dr. Bloggs, and they say, oh, well, he's not here on Thursdays or Wednesdays, you'll have to see Gladys Witherspoon or something. It's gone, and I don't know where it went, and I don't quite understand why it went. It just kind of, I blinked, and primary care just changed. It became a factory.
Well, there's a range of factors. One, I've just explained the changing nature of society and expectation.
So it's powerful.
There was contractual changes, for right or wrong. So the 24/7 contract that went to now my contract is from 8 AM till 6:30 PM Monday to Friday. Whether it's right or wrong, but that is the contract the NHS gives me. So the contractual change meant there was loss of continuity.
But that's fair. Well, hey, that's kind of fair, because the old contract, and maybe some people here don't know what the old contract was. I mean, the old contract gave you 24-hour responsibility, and you used to have to get up in the middle of the night and go and see, people with all kinds of problems, which it's clearly not sensible. So you have, that went. You surrendered that. I think you gave up £5,000 each, didn't you, to fund the out of hours, and then it ran out of money, didn't it? And then the Department of Health had to deliver barrel loads of money to make it work. I mean, it was the most badly negotiated thing I've ever seen, and they said, we need to negotiate this by the 1st of April, so everybody hung back, and on the 31st of March everybody said, we'll do a deal for twice the price. Oh really? How business-like is that?
Well, say there was a number of factors. The contractual change was imposed, there was a deal to be done, but where we are now is that the delivery mechanism has changed, the expectation and the nature of delivery is very different over the last 30 years. The facilities we've got, the diagnostics we've got, the treatments we've got is very different to what it was when I first went into practice.
Do you do blood tests at your place? Do you do near patient testing, or do you still have to send it off to the lab?
Most goes to the lab.
I mean, anyway.
If I had the budget, I would not send it to the lab, but I do not have any control about who sets the contract for if a patient needs a blood test The contract is with a service that I have no control over.
All over Europe they do it in the practice. So the next step after that was Lansley's lunacy. Now, I remember doing lots of conferences for the NHS. Well, no, let's talk about the NHS, because at the fund holding time, you started the National Association of Fund Holders. Were you there at the beginning? I know Paul Lambden was there. It was...
Well, when we were moving, Sally, who's over there, found a photograph of me winning my first NAFP award, which was linked to this mental health services. So I was involved in as much that we were a fund holding practice. But in '97, as fund holding was things would change, we evolved into the National Association of Primary Care, with a view that we needed to be representative or allow membership from all of primary care. So it's the four contractor services.
Wasn't that really that Mike Dixon set up the alliance and nicked all your members? Because Mike was the flavour of the month in the department, wasn't he? You were seen as like the ex-fund holders, the rump of the Tory party, doctors to the Tory party. Mike Dixon came in with his bow tie and his, if you're a nurse you can belong. He suddenly got a huge load of members, and I think you were left thinking, well, what are we going to do? So then you became NAPSI.
Yeah.
You tried to get back into the business.
No, fund holding went, so there was no point having an association. There still was, from the members, a reason to continue to support them understanding policy into practice. There was a bit of lobbying or development of policy, which we're still doing, trying to help our colleagues do their job better. But our colleagues became the four contractor services, so we have membership now within pharmacy, within optometry. We've got a few dental services now within the organisation, as well as community services, and right the way into secondary care now. So the membership has expanded to those who see the benefit of being...
Let's talk about Lansley's reforms. I mean, I did a lot of conferences with you, and I stood on the stage listening to Lansley saying, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the number of PCTs, put docs in the driving seat, and have a management cap. And we all thought, what a bloody good idea that was. Yeah, we all sat and clapped like a bunch of seals. And what happened? Because you were involved with
the pause happened.
Well, that was.
And then the legislation got so big, it got.
No, but you told me a story about you went in on the Wednesday after the election, wasn't it? And you tell them the story about it.
Well, it was when the white paper was delivered. It was 60 days after the election. I think it had taken Thatcher 10 years to do her reforms, Blair 6 years, and Lansley 60 days. But you were involved in advising Lansley, weren't you? At that sort of stage.
You didn't know what was coming, did you?
Didn't know when we opened the white paper and read the word abolished in front of PCTs and SHAs 2 or 3 weeks before. There was not a lot of talk about that, and all of a sudden it was a case of the only way we're going to enact the reforms that tries to get clinical thinking and clinical leadership into the new system was, for right or wrong, I know your view was just get them into senior positions in the PCT, the reforms, and Andrew Lansley thought it was better to restructure and start from a new type of system.
But he didn't, did he? I mean, the truth is that when the coalition were negotiating their positions on various bits and pieces, Lansley was not involved in the discussions over the health service. It was the Tory bloke whose name I can never remember, and the Lib Dem bloke that wrote the Red Book, and they redefined what the reforms were going to be like. And Lansley, so the story goes, and I think it's true, that Lansley didn't know any more than you did. I mean, he knew earlier, but the reforms that you worked on and the reforms that I, compared conferences up and down the country, there were nothing like Lansley's reform. I mean, why didn't you just say this is ridiculous and walk away?
It got too difficult and so big, and the initial part of the reforms, when you tried to, if you said what are we trying to achieve from prime legislation, at the time Andrew Lansley was saying there's two things, and it's all around accountability, but alignment of clinical decision making with the resources that are deployed as a result of that. So we want to bring back the legal accountability for those who are committing resource costs enshrined in law, and secondly we want law to have accountability for outcomes. Hence we had the 5 domains of measuring that investment in a way that was... So that was the construct.
At a practical level, James, the legislation said 2 or more GP practices can come together as a CCG. I mean, didn't that tell you it was Mickey Mouse?
Well, the principles I think were sound, but the way it was enacted and the end legislation, which had everything from changing fluoridation of water into the abolition of SHAs, it was so enormous.
So what happened in clinical senate?
I don't think anybody could fully understand a piece of legislation was so huge.
Yeah.
I think it was David Nicholson who said it was so big you can see it from outer space.
Yeah.
That got lost in a lot of debate. The pause, which had vested interest from different sectors saying it's not going to work.
Well, no. I mean, let's be fair.
But it's history.
But it's an important part of the history because it's part of how we got here. The pause only came about because Cameron lost his bottle, and he went to Ealing, the Ealing Trust. I was there and watched him, and you could see from his body language he didn't know what to do. So he got Field in and promised him a knighthood that he never got, and he delivered a report that said, "Yes, Prime Minister." You know, I mean, I think anyway, the pause was the end of it. Really, it was the ruination, and it's ruined the health service really since 2012.
Just we've got an ex-director general in the audience, so maybe he or she may not, but we'll know more than us.
I mean, we all know that now we're desperately trying to dig our way out and scrape Lansley off our boots.
But I think the principles of making the people who commit the resource accountable for it was sound. Because this goes back to that other saying at the end of funding.
Didn't you say to Lansley, this isn't going to work? Everybody else was saying it. I mean, the surgeons.
I was saying
the surgeons wanted to vote for it because Lansley wanted to increase the amount of private practice that hospitals could do, and the surgeons quite rightly saw. This is going to be a few.
I was saying a GP with a budget is worth 10 on the committee.
Yeah, exactly. And
we've got an awful lot of committees.
Yes, and the surgeons voted for it. The BMA vacillated because they were split. I remember they had their special Saturday conference, didn't they? I remember watching that. Who else was? I don't think anybody else was for it. But there wasn't a coalition of opposition, was there?
No, not a coalition.
You couldn't get people lined up. I know Peter Carter. Peter Carter at the RCN tried to get your lot together. He tried to get the BMA. He tried to get everybody together at a dinner to oppose it and stand up united and say we do not want to do this. And I don't think you didn't want to do it, which is fine, and the BMA didn't, and the whole thing fell. But it's just delivered as chaos.
Well, some would say. I mean, I'm sure from CCG governing bodies, on a governing body, lots of CCGs are doing great work. There's clinicians who are saying this is working for us.
But they all
they're
know
making
they're
change.
too small.
I don't think anyone's saying that it's not working.
I was with a CCG this week and earlier in the week, and they got 225,000 people. There are bridge clubs bigger. You can't commission. You said yourself you can't commission in these small units.
It depends on what you're commissioning. If you're commissioning the services that I'll come back to primary care home again, then you can do it on different sizes.
Well, if you're going to carry the risk for the population, you've got to do what Denmark do and get up to about 500,000. I mean, that's the actuarial calculation. I mean, it's not an opinion; it's a fact. You can't do it for 200,000 people.
What is the size of accountable care?
You end up having. What happens is you have your money top sliced because they think we've got to reserve some money in case we do have a problem, and then the amount that you can actually use to commissioning gets reduced, gets compressed. The top slicing gets more and more panicked, and it excuse me, it doesn't work.
We're very impressed at the moment with accountable care systems and accountable care organisations. It's a North American construct.
No, it's not. It's a district health authority.
Yeah.
But
I used to run one.
But if I've been to a medical hospital to discuss accountable care and accountable care organisations, and I've asked what is the size where you can risk manage the budget for a population, and I've heard varying degrees of response to that. But what do you think is the size where they say, if you're less than this, you may be in trouble? Beneficiaries.
Yeah, I don't know what it's
5 to 15,000 beneficiaries, they call them.
Yeah.
So a population between 5 to 15,000 is the construct of an accountable care organisation in the USA.
No, it's too.
So they're saying,
and that's why a lot of them have gone broke.
well,
a lot have gone broke.
some are expanding, but that's where they're starting from. So I think if you're looking at the evidence and what we're trying to import into the reforms at the moment, it is not always at one scale, and it certainly doesn't have to be the size you're talking about to risk manage your budget. It depends on what level at which you are saying this is the budget for a local population before it becomes specialised or a bigger organisation needs to manage it.
Okay, well let's take this now to the next step where, I mean, Simon is desperately trying to, find ways out of this mess. He's got to find 30 billion by 2020. It's about, 200 weeks? He's not going to do that, is he? It's all a question of how much can we stop doing and get away with it before the public, have a right ruck over it. So now the fashion is, we've got accountable care organisations, vanguards, which I don't know quite where they fit in, and I mean there are lots of good ideas in vanguards, and then you've got your accountable care thing, which I want to come to right at the end. I want to explore the others. So if you look at accountable care organisations, they're population-based, capitated budgets, vertically integrated care, no commissioning, right? So you get rid of all the costs of the CCGs. They cost you 300,000 each, just to run. So you get rid of all that lot, and you look at it as vertically integrated care. Now, where do you see primary care fitting in with an accountable care organisation?
Well, this is why I'm doing we're just starting to publish some comparative work between accountable care organisations in the US and some of the models we're looking at in the UK. And there's a well-worn line now that once you've seen one accountable care organisation, you've seen one accountable care organisation, because there is no standard.
No,
they're not about vertical integration, they're not about horizontal.
And don't forget, they're run by insurers, and they decide who they will be accountable for. So a lot of them pick their population. So I don't think there's anything to be learned from the States.
So if you want to check on JAMA, the publication from the 2nd of July by, I think it was Snelling et al., who first described accountable care systems and talked about 5 models of delivery. One was a multi-specialty community service, one was a vertically integrated service, one was community outreach. So interestingly, it's a paper that describes what we're trying to do at the moment, but there's the principles of accountable care systems there's lots of different models could deliver the agenda about improving quality, driving down costs, and our vanguards, our 5 different types of vanguards, are again testing the process of being more accountable for care with some budgetary accountability. But there's not one model. It's not about vertical integration or horizontal integration or outreach from nursing care, or it's all of it. It's under test. I mean, so there is the accountable care organisation doesn't exist as an entity, and an accountable care system just describes lots of ways of improving quality while driving down costs.
So where does primary care fit in with it?
Well, primary care fits depending on which model. So the models we've got, the multi-specialty community provider, is more of the horizontal integration of primary care and community services at a size that's been described under the MCP framework, which we've had out. The PACS model is more about the vertical integration between primary and acute care. Then we've got the urgent care vanguards, which is looking at a specific type of service which is being overloaded.
Okay, well, let's
so
not
there's lots of different modelling.
I do get that, but I mean, let's discount vanguards for a moment. I mean, they're based on the management model of positive deviance, which is a whole different ballgame. If you look at, let's just take the usual model that we think of in vertically integrated care. If you want to look after a population, and the one thing you want to do is to stop people coming into hospital, then you have to control the doorway, and the GP is the doorway. So hospitals now, because they changed the rules 3 years ago, I think, trusts can buy GP practices now, or they can, not buy them, they can acquire GP practices. Now I see a lot of value in that, in connecting primary care very closely to the hospital, in terms not only of training but access to diagnostics and the whole stream. It seems to me if I was running a hospital, I'm trying to keep people out of my hospital, and I would be incentivized to do that because it's a population-based capitated budget. The tariff goes, so I don't want people to come in because I'd earn more if they come in. I've only got one budget, so I've got an interest in keeping them out, and I've got an interest in sending them home early as well. If I control the social end of it, I'd buy care homes. So if I was running a hospital, I'd buy GP practices and I'd buy care homes, and I'd run the whole thing vertically. Is that a model that fits easily in primary care, in your view?
It's a model that's being tried in certain areas all over the country. The question is, does that model, if it improves the interface working, but does it drive down costs? I think we understand that the reason why our NHS is able to be fully state funded and free at the point of need, in the main, we have some charges, is based on the vast majority of contacts or through a generalist service in the community. What we're doing at the moment is, I would say this, but it is an under-resourced part. So let's just say, I'm going to make you the Chancellor, I'm going to give you £100 million to spend in a sector. And at the moment, that £100 million, you've got an A&E service that's dealing somewhere between 30 to 40% of contacts are of a nature and low complex that should be delivered in primary care. Yeah. So the symptom is in the A&E. The problem, and we've got evidence, and we have got controlled trials now that show where you've got poor access to primary care, you get overload in A&E. Yeah. So you have a symptom of overload in A&E, and you've got a disease in accessing primary care. Yeah. You've got £100 million to spend. Where are you going to treat the disease or the symptom?
I'll give it to social services, but
no, because it's an important principle. Because this is real. What we've done.
I'll answer your question. I was at a hospital recently. It doesn't matter which one, and they were very worried about getting people out. They couldn't get people out. They had a very poor relationship with social services. Social services were skinned. There really wasn't a point talking to them. They had no money. So I said, well, let's stop people coming in. And they said, well, that's a good idea. How do we do that? So I said, well, let's have a look at the data. And it was quite easy to do. We just analysed the postcode data, right? We just said, let's look at everybody that's come in. We want postcode and age and GP practice. You can do it on an Excel spreadsheet, easy. And they did it. And we found, and I'm not sure I've got the figures quite right because it's a little while ago now, but we found that 60% were coming from 4 or 5 postcode areas, from 2 GP practices, and I think 80% of the over 70s were coming in from 2 care homes. That was just analysis of the data. So they said, well, what should we do? I said, well, community matrons, training, go into the care homes, train the healthcare assistants, get them into the hospital, train them, go and sort the GP practices out, say, look, here's the data. Why is it happening here? How can we help you? And then the hospital said, well, who's going to pay for that? I said, well, you're paying for it now because you've got your beds blocked up. Your opportunity cost is lost. You know, and so if it was an accountable care organisation, to answer your question, if it was an accountable care organisation, I would do that. Because I've only got one capitated population-based budget. Can only spend a health pound once. So I would take over primary care and I would run it very differently.
It depends on, going back to, it's not just the tariff, but if you are doing work in an expensive sector that shouldn't be there, you will break your budget. And that's part of the problem why we've got a broken budget. We've got so much activity in a sector that shouldn't be doing that work.
No, I agree with that, James, and you're right. If it actually, A&E gets a bad rap, really, because you get all the photographs of people on trolleys. We now have trolley nurses or corridor nurses, don't we now? They get a bad rap. They're actually very efficient. They can get people through the system very quickly. But what they can't do is get them through the system. So then, if you analyse why, you say, oh, we've got all these frail elderly people coming into hospital and we can't get them out. No, that's not the question. We've got all these frail elderly people coming into hospital. Why? And it's all about what happens in the community and primary care. And it's a failure of primary care. It is not a failure of the hospital or A&E. It's a failure of your lot. Now, that's not because they're stupid or numpties. is because they can't do it. The system is broken. The system won't let them do it. So you have to start thinking about how you make the system work differently. I mean, you look at acuity.
I have the answer.
Okay, I know I'm coming to that. I mean, look at acuity in the elderly. Look at acuity in the elderly, right? You know, people go into a care home. You know, people get to the age 70. 70, can you imagine being 70? And they go into a care home, right? And they're okay. And then they're in there, their acuity drops off a cliff. Before you know it, they actually should be in a nursing home, but we can't transfer them, and the care assistants aren't properly trained. What happens? They end up in hospital. What happens in hospital? Their acuity goes down the pan, they go back to a care home that still can't look after them, so they come back.
I've often said what Roy doesn't know about primary care, he makes up.
That's fair enough. I've got away with it for most of my life. I know you've got the answer. Ladies and gentlemen, having described the conundrum, now Marvo the magician will produce a rabbit out of his hat and tell us all about the caring primary wearing care home, primary care home. Who thought of the primary care home? Whose idea is it?
It's a collective. The actual definitive paper was written by my colleague and chair of the NAPC, Nab Shaw, and myself, as a direct commission
Where
from...
is Nab? He's not here, is he?
He said he could not stand listening to me for an hour and a half, just like this.
Watching his, I was going to watch it. I know, he's probably watching. Yeah. He's having a rinse.
So it was from a discussion with Simon Stevens and a direct commission saying, you know, put up or shut up. We've heard about the NAPC's outlook. Can you describe a model that would engage not just your colleagues in general practice, but the wider community in the wider community services and secondary care, and deliver some of the aspirations of the 5-year forward view, the lower hospital stays, prevention of admissions, early discharge. So fast forward, we described something which wasn't easy, but was fairly straightforward, because what it did was incorporate what we've been discussing, the learning from collectively between Nad and myself, nearly 60 years of primary care practice, with advice from colleagues, a strong evidence base, as strong an evidence base as you can have for what a primary care system should be delivering.
Describe it in words of one syllable.
Right.
You know,
so,
what is the bloody primary care home? I don't understand it. I've looked at the website, I have no idea. What is it?
Right. It is scaling up list-based practice, so it's still saying that the registration of patients to access the NHS is still through what is now called general practice. I've never been precious about maintaining it called general practice. We're calling it a primary care home, and we're scaling up to a point where you do not lose personalised care. So patients would still recognise a local service, accessible, like my practice, local, with people they know, and a continuum within the team and a single care record.
Right,
which
so
is where general
you'd
practice.
still have your normal doctor, or a selection of, a choice from whatever you get, whoever you can get in, you'd still have all that. But what happens is, so I go in and I've got, you know, maggots in my scrotum, you know. If any of you've seen...
I thought I'd cured that for you.
What was that?
The Book of Mormon.
If any of you've seen the Book of Mormon show, you'll know why I'm saying maggots in your scrotum. If you've not seen the Book of Mormon, go and see the show. It's hysterical. Right at the beginning, this guy presents with, and he says, I've got maggots in my scrotum. And the guy says, have you seen the doctor? And he said, I am the doctor. I mean, it doesn't sound very funny, but it's hysterical in the show. That's where I got the phrase from. So I turn up, I've got whatever it is I've got. What happens?
Right. Because I don't see patients who turn up with that. They'll say, I've got maggots in my scrotum and I've come in a spaceship and my son's got ADHD, I'm running out of money, my wife's left me, she's got diabetes, but I'm not sure whether I've got it now, and
Can you catch it?
So you get multimorbidity across the family in 10 minutes. And what happens at the moment across general practice, so the nature of presentation is not best delivered by a GP or a GP and a practice nurse with an administrative team that is just saying the next appointment is, and then possibly, well, we know now 15% of all contacts are of an administrative nature where their administration could be without a face-to-face contact. Of the rest, at least 50% of everybody who needs care does not need a physician who's been around for 30 years. They need a different type of model. So the important thing, what you would get, is as you rang up and said, I've got maggots in my scrotum, a care navigator might be saying, I know Roy, he's that guy who's suffered with bipolar for a long time, we'll get him in to the community psychiatric nurse, Robin, who has got an appointment tomorrow.
This is a bit close to home.
So, you know Robin well. So you would start to be navigated to the right person first time, who you still knew, and Robin, the CPN.
Okay, so step one, you do telephone triage. That will please Harry. Telephone
triage. You would navigate through a system where you've got a multi-professional team, and you get the right contact first time. Rather than seeing me, I'm saying, okay, Roy, I've got to broker you to community psychiatric services, which are somewhere else, and I've got a transaction and a form to fill in, and you've got to wait.
Yeah.
And
okay, so I get the triage. I get the triage thing. Okay.
No, this is the delivery.
Who does the triage?
Well, we're talking about care navigation now. It's not a new term, but the idea that somebody
press
would be
one
able to,
if you're nervous. Press one repeatedly if you're very nervous.
No, you would be talking to a human, and at the moment, we've been reflecting for many years. We've sent our receptionists on training courses, on demand management, on customer relations.
Speak to a receptionist.
At the moment, most receptionists are paid £8 an hour, and there is still an expectation, even from GPs like me, that they're going to be able to do customer relations with the most complex customer you can have. You're not got somebody who's got the wrong jumper from Marks and Spencer's, you've got somebody who's worried they've got cancer, and they're saying, I'm sorry, there's no GP appointment for 3 weeks. It's just unacceptable. We expect them to...
Have you got receptionists triaging?
No, not yet. We've got to upskill them first. What I'm saying is care navigation.
How do you do the confidentiality? And they're not accountable, they don't have a professional body, they're not on a register. If they could go to the local newspaper, it's horrendous.
And what's the difference? I can appoint a receptionist tomorrow from Wallasey who has no training, no background, but has got some skills in telephone, and her CV says she's done some receptionist work. She can sign a disclaimer form and then see access to every single patient who's registered with my practice. That is how general practice runs.
Well,
if you don't recognise that,
well, I know. I do. I absolutely do get it, and it's not. It's not a disclaimer. They sign a confidentiality agreement.
Sorry.
Yeah. So no, I get that, but there's a big difference between.
So that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, but I mean the idea that I'm going to discuss the maggots in my scrotum with someone who is not on a proper register and can't be struck off, that's horrendous.
Has anyone phoned a GP surgery where the receptionist says, what's wrong with you? Of course they do.
You can't do that. I'd say I've got maggots in my scrotum.
You shouldn't do that.
You mustn't do that, James. That's not that destroys the whole idea of what we're doing.
I'll give you a lecture on primary care one of these days, or general practice. That is the situation at the moment, and GPs generally
horrified at that. Are you horrified at that? Put your hand up if you're horrified. Put your hand up if you don't give a shit. Put your hand up if you're just waiting for a drink at the end.
But general practice, the reason why you employ receptionists is to try and manage the care load the patient needs through an appointment system.
I just think that's horrendous to have a nurse. It's not even a nurse. I mean, a nurse can be struck off, can't they? But what happens if a receptionist, some journalist comes up to them and says, I'd like to, if Lilley ever ring you at all? Well, I can't really tell you that, really,
But Roy, we've got over 7,500 general practices at the moment, except for some that may be seeing the GP as the first point of call, but the vast majority of general practice has a reception system who you ring or email or walk into and say, can I have an appointment with the doctor? That is how general practice works in the majority.
Yeah,
have I been missing something?
Online appointments.
Yeah, but you will still go through a reception type system, which you may get online.
You go through there's a difference between going through a reception type system and a triage by a complete unskilled, unregistered, unqualified person off the street.
It's not quite that, but the appointment of reception is a low-paid person who has got some skills in administering people who need an appointment with a healthcare professional. And at the moment, outside the primary care home, you've got the GP, the practice nurse generally, and an administrative team to support them.
I've been to practices where the triage is done by GPs.
I'm astonished you didn't realise that reception do that. That's how general practice run.
No. You're mischaracterising what I'm saying. I understand going through a reception process, but not a triage, which is what you're asking them to do. There's a big difference, I think. Now, I've been to practices where doctors do a telephone triage, and it works very well. You put your best people into that first. That's why A&E's been revolutionised. Since we've had consultants working 24/7 in A&E and Tier 1 A&Es, it really works. But I never for one moment thought we got to the point where receptionists were going to triage.
We're training them to become care navigators who have skills in demand management, customer relations, handling difficult situations and navigating to the right care. So it's not what's wrong with you, but asking the nature of the problem, how urgent it is, and whether there's a different healthcare professional who should be seeing them. So with your maggots and your mental health problem, a navigator was saying it may be that Robin could see you, and you know Robin anyway, and an appointment is given with the right person first time. No transactions.
I think we need to move on from this because I'm in shock. So okay, so right, well, I get triaged by the lady who used to work in the chip shop, and she says, right, you need to see, I don't know, you need to see our psychiatric outworker or whatever. I can't.
Who deals with rodents?
I can't do this line of questioning. It's so ridiculous.
Fortunately, we've got about nearly 7 million of the population of England who get it, and the care model where we without any financial incentives, we are getting inundated with healthcare professionals, community services, as well as general practice, other primary care contractors, and hospitals saying this model is the right model to deliver the 5-year.
Okay, so let's move on. Primary care home, right? So I've got through I'm out of shock, and I've got through your system, and then I get triaged off to the most appropriate place. Makes a lot of sense. Don't like the way you do it, but I like the outcome. Makes sense. And that's really, please excuse me, that's almost, it's your practice, isn't it? Like beefed up on steroids because you've been doing this for a long time.
We are incorporating a long organisational memory, and that's one of the things that the NHS has suffered terribly with, is a corporate memory.
Yeah.
I remember doing some work with Sir Liam Donaldson in 2000, an organisation with a memory, remember that?
Yeah.
About patient safety.
Yeah.
Robert Francis recreated exactly what that was saying 13 years later.
Yeah.
No learning from it, it was largely the same. So we've tried to incorporate the organisational memory of what reforms have been trying to achieve, what was successful, what we should not reproduce, and produce an evidence base that delivers something where the best thing that I get is that when colleagues go, they read the document, they get it, and they go, well, there's nothing new in that. Absolutely. We're not trying to say we've created a completely new idea with some magical thinking. We've got a strong evidence base and a corporate memory that says, yeah, there's things in here I fully get, and the second thing is, you know what, this is what I've always wanted to do.
So you've sort of vertically integrated primary care, haven't you, really, by connecting. I mean, do you see it, if it was an organisational model, and I'm not keen on them really, but if it was, it would be a hub, perhaps?
No, its mature state would be a type of form that had one team, one organisation looking after a registered list with a delegated whole population budget. Now we've got to go through the details of that. At the moment we're just in the forming stage where we are starting to get a collective process of community services, diagnostics in the community, primary care contractors,
so
how many
GP practices would you have in a primary care hub?
Well, it depends on, we're talking about a population size of between 30 and 50,000, and you've heard that quite a lot now.
Isn't it?
It's the right size to maintain personalised care and the right size to deliver population health management. And that is the key to doing the prevention agenda, the early detection, keeping people out of hospital, and being able to deliver an extended service so they are open when you're going home.
Right, so 30,000, that's 15 doctors.
Again, the modelling is going on that we might need less doctors if we get the right first contact.
Yeah.
You know, because there will be community pharmacy, optometry, dental services, community nursing. There will be some secondary care expertise coming in within that
so
model.
So it all really depends on. I don't want to come back to this unnecessarily, but I mean, this all really comes back to that initial triage, doesn't it? Because if you route someone wrongly, you've got to find a way back and then start again.
But a lot of people who do use their practice a lot, and it is local, it remains personalised, won't be ringing up somebody they've never heard of or don't know. They'll have some confidence, and probably that care navigator will know something about them. You can, without being intrusive, ask the nature of problems, the urgency, have a discussion with the patient about what is the most appropriate time to be seen and who with. What we're saying is we've got to have the multi-specialty team to make sure they deliver then the right care.
We're going to have to leave
time.
the issue of the triage hanging, I think, because I'm still in shock. But so, I mean, so you're going to be looking after people with.
Can I just say the head of a national patient representative group, when we were doing the first analysis of the expressions of interest, and we had 140 of 30 to 50,000, we could only do 15 rapid test sites that had been going for a year, and we should be getting the analysis of their first year's activity next week. We'll be publishing, I hope. Is it next week? We're publishing next week the activity. She said, after hearing the presentations of the shortlist, and this was not tongue-in-cheek, she said, I have lived in the same house for 50 years. If I don't get one of these near me, I am moving. Now, the power of understanding what we were trying to deliver against healthcare needs and people who are looking after the interests of large patient groups.
I'm sure it's got a lot to recommend it. You'll still be looking after people with long-term conditions.
We'll be looking after the generalist care of that population's health.
I mean, isn't the future really? I mean, aren't you just perpetuating, you know, with a polished front door, pretty much what you're doing now, better, bigger, with a different triage on the front door? I mean, really, shouldn't we really be thinking about how we lift all these people away from primary care? And if you look at some of the technologies that are available now, for example, if you wanted to maintain an otherwise well diabetic, or people with COPD particularly, there are all kinds of apps and devices that you can get where people can maintain themselves. You build a call centre for a population of 300,000, and you just take it all away from the GPs and run it from the call centre, and then you know, if they appear as an outlier, then the nurse rings up and says, you're a diabetic, Roy, your numbers are all askew.
Roy,
that must be the maggots then.
There's a thing called evidence, which we're doing, and there's things called magical thinking. And if you are talking about what is the system, what is the part of the health service, if you're talking about international interest in our NHS, my experience, and that is travelling to other healthcare systems and to discuss this, is that not many want to incorporate the NHS. What they want to understand is how a service can be delivered to a population of 65 million people that is fully state funded. And the answer is we've got a strong system of primary care. So most international healthcare systems want to incorporate what we've got, which is about list-based practice.
I'm not arguing that, but
a scale that we're not delivering at the moment.
James, we've got what is it? I forget. We've got 3.5 million diabetics in this country. They say in 5 years' time we'll have 5 million. Okay, you can't look after 5 million diabetics with all the love in the world. Primary care is not robust enough. We have got to find other ways of doing it, and all the time we turn our backs on technologies where people of the baby boomer generation who are coming through, who are net savvy, they all have mobile phones that they can use, they order their holidays online, and look at the expansion in GoDoc and Babylon now. These are apps on your phone where you can get an immediate appointment with a doc. I mean, you have to pay for it now, but I mean, surely those are the real future, not just kind of polishing up what we're doing and hope it will last.
All of that needs to be incorporated into near-patient testing.
Not for 30,000 population. You can't do it. Near-patient testing.
Accountable care organisations in America are doing it on smaller sizes.
Well,
and we're trying to adopt that.
Not the call centres. I mean, the call centres are for about 300,000. I mean, John will tell you. John and I have a company where we try and help makers of medical devices of overseas come here and get traction with innovations and ideas. We only do devices, and I don't know how many times we've tried to do near-patient testing where you take the bloods, the reagent is put in. It's okay, it's not the total solution, and there are times when you will need a more sophisticated test, but for the run-of-the-mill, most of the tests you can do near patient in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. Now, you can't do that because of the way the money is. Well, maybe you could. Can you do that now if you aggregate the funding? Could you do that?
If you had control of the budget, you would start to deliver very different services than I have to deal with at the moment. You would start to do much more desktop analysis and near patient
so
testing.
You would say, so you could say, and you tried a product for us, I think, didn't you, to tell the difference between a bacteriological infection and a virus, which used extensively in Scandinavia.
9 years ago.
Pardon? Yes.
9 years.
9 years ago, James helped us with that, and it's a fantastic bit of kit. You just, and you have your coughs and cold clinic run by a nurse. You don't get it. She says, she does the test and she says the virus, take 2 aspirin and go home. Or she said, well, you've got a bacteriological, we need to do a bit more for you, and maybe you should see the doctor or the nurse or whatever, blah, blah. Now, and then we heard who is she? Some doctor at the Department of Health said there's a £1 million prize for someone who can stop us prescribing antibiotics. And we just said, please, the technology is there, all of this stuff is there, but all the time we perpetuate the models of care like you're doing, with a great heart and a good spirit and loads of vocation. We're not going to move on, James. We're stuck in the 70s.
I will take you to some of our rapid test sites. You can see the dramatic change from standard general practice into a care delivery model that is starting to meet the needs of a local population in a way that we haven't delivered through generalist practice in the main. Some of the developments in the last year are absolutely astonishing, but I don't think we've got time or any evidence to say let's start from a blank sheet of paper, rip it up and make yet another attempt at a different model. This is building from, it's just accelerating what's happened since probably 1948 to now, to a size which would say we can do proper population health management, proper healthcare modelling and workforce modelling against that population's health need, not lose the personalised service, which if you talk about the most valued and loved public service, it's always going to be
It's always the GP. What have you promised Simon? How's he going to measure all this money that he's giving you?
Well, the first is the promise that we would have 2 analyses, one qualitative, which is the Nuffield Trust had the contract for that, one more quantitative, return on investment, which companies is returning on the first 15 sites. And
but it doesn't really have to be an ROI, does it? I mean, the services just have
it's
to
not
be
really an ROI in terms of an ROI,
ROI,
but it's just saying there has been some small investment to get these first 15 sites, but the next 77 that have been identified, and we've got another 50 in the pipeline-ish, have not had any funding at all. So one of the things was from NHS England, can we quickly scale this up?
Does it need funding? What does it need funding for?
It doesn't at the moment, because people are saying it's what I've always wanted to do. So we've got to this size of where we've got 6 to 7 million population coverage without any investment other than a knowledge support system, a network of learning and people to go out and help develop these sites. And we're getting an ever increasing number of people wanting to do it. What we said to NHS England is we had a challenge to get 200 sites by the end of April. We're on target to do that. What we haven't got is a polished model, and the thing that has always challenged the NHS around innovation, because there's 2 parts to this, and we're great at inventing things, so we invent lots of things but we don't spread. What we've done is invent something that isn't polished yet, but it's spreading like wildfire.
Yeah, well, everybody's using the word spread at the moment. It's actually diffusion. It's Roger's theory of diffusion. I don't know why we call it spread. It's
adoption,
it's
whatever.
It's not marmalade. Anyway, look, have we got some questions?
We certainly have.
Go on.
James, well, first of all, you've got loads of heart on Periscope. People can touch the screen and like and whatever, so you're getting lots of love hearts.
Really?
But that's especially especially when you're putting Roy in his place. They like about what Roy doesn't know about primary care he makes up. They love that. That nearly broke Periscope. But two comments
I've also
I wanted.
got a soft spot for Roy though. It's a dog on West Kirby Beach.
But, yeah, first of all, people are saying primary care home sounds fantastic. Isn't, like your practitioners are saying, isn't this primary care like the population always thought GP practice was? So isn't this making it the kind of ideal that people have always wanted?
Absolutely, because probably 30 years ago I tried to be all things to all people without necessarily the skill base to deliver that, and people accepted it. What we're saying is we're just going to get the right model, the right workforce to deliver about the expectation. So patients who register for the NHS, they would have a greater expectation, and that expectation, and the organisation that delivers care is more ambitious about the care delivery and the more episodes of care that it can fetch, and it can't do it with the 20th century model of general practice.
We got any more?
So yeah, the other comment was, so is this general practice Buurtzorg style-y?
Well, we're real big fans of Buurtzorg here, because that's, I mean, just while you're thinking about the answer.
NAPC style.
Well, you know, well, Buurtzorg's interesting because it's got nurses that are trained a mile wide and an inch deep, whereas the specialisms that you were talking about earlier are a mile deep and an inch wide, and that's part of the problem. Right, let's just tell us who you are. Give us your PIN number.
I run GP Access.
Is that
So
working?
if you're doing evaluation, what are you measuring?
Right, we've been challenged with what would be the metrics. Of course, NHS England, for their return on investment, saying how many lives have you saved, how much money have you saved. We're saying at this stage, we've identified the biggest financial risk in our NHS at the moment is staff morale. If we don't get that right, if we continue, whether I'm a non-exec director at the Royal Liverpool, I was saying earlier, that the morale, we've always had low morale, but at the moment, we've got a morale situation where change fatigue is at its greatest, the ability to adopt new ways of working is difficult. So we wanted to say, does the primary care home start to change the morale, staff satisfaction? So we've been measuring that, and there does seem to be a consistency and improvement from where we started. This is what the Nuffield Trust have been looking at. And the second thing, the public's top concern has always been and remains waiting and access. So does this new model of delivery improve waiting and access? And we're finding that people are saying, who are registering for the service, yes, it does seem to be that access to the right care and shorter waiting times to access it is being delivered. So we want to
from what to what?
From whatever the baseline they've been measured in the rapid test sites.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
and then when we
I'm going to move you. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're having softer metrics before we get into. If we get that right and we get the environment right, we will then start to deliver all of the desirable things about can we prevent patients being admitted to hospital. If we're going to measure that now, we'll.
Sounds pretty flaky to me. Anyway, yes, ma'am.
Hi, hello James. Liz Butterfield. I'm on the board of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. I'm really interested in how you have managed the professional relationships between the different contractors to get everybody incentivised to work more effectively together, so that Roy's cough could be checked when he gets his cough, could be checked out in the pharmacy maybe to see if it's bacterial or viral.
I want to see a consultant in hospital.
But I'm interested in how, you know, we say 40%
And that will break the
of A&E
NHS.
attendances shouldn't be there, but equally we might say some of the GP workload shouldn't be there either. So how have you, that's quite a challenge to get people working together differently, forgetting national contracts.
I mean, that's a good point. But the trouble with the pharmacy is, you know, you can't walk into the pharmacy and say I've got maggots in my scrotum, can you? And you're not trained to diagnose either. And you know, and I remember when my mum was alive, there's a pharmacist in the GP's practice, and he did a medicines review for my mum. It was terrific. He was so patient and lovely. And I said, fine, you're going to sort this out. He said, no, I've got to take it to the doctor and get it signed off. I mean, what's the point?
Well, we're in a transition there with pharmacists.
But you've been in a transition for 20 years.
I suppose my point is...
What's the point of a pharmacist? You're just technicians. You bob up and down behind the counter counting pills.
So, but it's a very logical place where you could do some of the care navigation, isn't it, if that were a first point of access to primary care for some people. And then you have a much better working relationship about who gets referred to you and who, you know, and so they don't all have to come to you.
I mean, pharmacists are a huge resource, but you're not. I don't think your training enables you to diagnose, and that's the problem.
Well, it does for minor conditions. That's exactly what community pharmacy can do. And
But
certainly,
if you've got a minor, what's a minor condition? A cough or a cold? You pull yourself together.
Well, first off, with community pharmacy, my view was that I was the policy advisor for walking centres. They've not quite worked out. I remember my neighbour, who was the chair of an LPC, said, well, we've got 10,000 of these, or when we had 10,000, we've got 11,000 of them already. They're called community pharmacies. Why are you creating walking centres? because these are, you can walk in, you can get minor illness managed, you can get diagnosis from pharmacists who have got clinical training, and then later was how you align pharmacy working with the general practice, and we started to co-locate, and now we've got, you know, pharmacists in general practice. But what we are doing, and the RPS are involved, along with, I can believe it, the PSNC. We've got some of the Pharmaceutical Negotiating Committee that looks after the contractual issues. So we've got Pharmacy Voice,
Sounds
all
like
of the
a
big players
conspiracy against patients
working together as part of a subgroup of what we call a technical advisory group for the primary care home, to analyse what part of a pharmacy contract could be aligned, because we've had malalignment and we've got poor incentives, and ultimately we move to our own institutions when things are going wrong. But what could we do to have not dispensing within the primary care home, but parts of the care delivery that pharmacy do, and pharmacy do well, not disconnected, and not just pluck a pharmacist out and say, because it's, I'm a bit concerned at the moment. I think it's a great start where pharmacists are working in general practice, but as soon as you say, how can we get a pharmacist to help the general practitioner, we've lost it. I thought it was how to get the pharmacist to improve the care of the local population who's registered with the general practitioner.
We ought to have an evening actually with you talking about pharmacy, because I just think that it's such a wasted resource. There should be so much more we can do. A gentleman in a rather nice blue suit. I think people who wear blue suits, there's something special about it.
Very, very kind of you, and maggotless this evening, I might add.
You've got to go and see the church in Norway. You've got to promise me you'll all go and buy a ticket and see it. It's fantastic.
It's the gentleman, it's been fascinating. Sorry, my name's Nigel Sloan. I'm managing director of a health analytics company called Solace. We will be familiar, all of us in this room, I'm sure, with the concept of triple aim: better patient outcomes, better patient experience at a reduced cost. It occurs to me, given the challenge that we all face, that could be best rewritten at the moment as the money, the money, the money. Primary care home, fascinating. James, how is it going to help bend the cost curve?
Well, it's very basically, it's incorporating the working and mindset of the contractor into much larger budgets. So I've been a non-exec at a hospital for 7 years. If we incorporated the contractor mindset into managing the hospital services, then we wouldn't need Carter report, because my youngest daughter, she doesn't do it now because she's grown up a little bit, but when used to state the obvious, she'd have this moment. And for some primary care, with great respect to Lord Carter, there's an awful lot of, you know, if you run your service on temporary staffing, if you don't manage your estate, your utilities and overheads, your business might go bust. For primary carers, whether it's in pharmacy, general practice, you go, because those principles mean that we can have a service that only uses 9% of the resource for 90% of the contact, because there's an inherent part of the contracted services, whether it's in dental services or optometry, that does have a vested interest in being efficient with its estate management, with its workforce, with its overheads.
But
hospitals aren't.
That's a good point. You see, bending the cost curve for the taxpayer is different to gaining operational efficiencies, which go into the practice that the partners can take out as drawings. Fair enough, that's the business model, but you win, the taxpayer doesn't.
No, this is once you've got that mindset into then managing larger budgets which are about patient flows, and recognising the massive inefficiency and the major transactions we have between different parts of a fragmented community system at the moment, or a vested interest in saying that you may need to extend your access, your opening times, because if mum with a baby with a temperature at 6 o'clock on a Friday night rings up and the surgery's closed, it's closed, as opposed to an organisation saying, well, if we don't facilitate that, we can either facilitate it in our organisation where we've got a cost base and we are going to be charged for that, or we can leave it to go to A&E at a cost 10 times of what it would be if we would be delivering it. Starts to change the mindset of the organisation, say, well, we've got to be more accessible, more open, longer opening hours. There's an inherent change to the service delivery, to patient flows, and changing that curve, but you've got to start to build in that type of...
I think that's a flaky answer, because it's only a shed load more money going into A&E because of the way that they do their accounting. They load all their overheads into every patient. I mean, if you look at service line accounting and you do it properly, it's not that expensive to go into A&E. It really isn't, and it's a lot more efficient if you've got a kid that
Well,
might
if
have
you've got a
meningitis.
tariff, you know, if there is a cost
Well,
of...
with an accountable care organisation, you have vertically integrated care, population-based budgets with a capitated budget. I don't buy this hospital business is more expensive, because if that's true, then Tesco's wouldn't have out-of-town superstores. Have you got a question there? Because I've got one at the back. Go on.
No, I just got a comment. I just, obviously Brexit, Article 50, but actually, James, you're trending at number 16. In actual fact, you're just below Angela Merkel, so I think that's quite an achievement. Well done, James. Primary care home. Yeah.
So I certainly wouldn't want to be on top of Angela Merkel. Anyway, Suki, yes, darling. Yes.
Hello, James. Really positive comments about primary care home just on social media at the moment through all our Twitter feeds, but there is a comment from somebody just wanting to get further clarity on if we are looking at the primary care home scaling up and personalised care, how is that actually, what does that mean to the patient who's actually, from a patient viewpoint, what does that mean? Because primary care home scaling up and personalised care.
It comes back to the tension between the family practice and the factory that it's all turned into. It's a good question.
No,
so the gentleman over here, John.
I said all that without me moving on. No, that is the process of designing something around a population size of 30 to 50,000, where we've done the analytics that say that you could still have a local service that's accessible through a short walk or a drive with a car park, and still have a range of people who deliver the care, who know each other on first name terms, who work as a one team, and people know there's some continuum between the care team that is delivering. So it's that balance. The personalised care, we think, starts to break down once you have a team that is so large. You then start to have fractionated ways of delivering. You have shift working and red team on today, and so it's that balance between one system for one organisation, one team delivering against a local health population. And we're seeing some of the super practices of 30,000 and plus anyway, whose patients still feeling as they're getting general practice personalised care through their registered list.
It is just, I think there's an interesting thing here. We've got one more question for this gentleman here, and then we need to stop. But it is interesting because, I mean, there will be people with long-term conditions, or perhaps older people, who do appreciate having the continuity of care with one particular doctor.
And they can start that.
Yes, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, I'd go and see a doctor on Waterloo Station, because I'm there more often than I'm home. I get up in the morning, the GP practice is closed, come home in the evening, it's closed, Saturday it's there for an emergency, and Sunday I go to church and pray for a cure. But I never see the lights on in primary care. I mean, I honestly don't.
You will be delivering that.
Yeah, and not only that, there's
evidence-based.
2,000 people on my train, right? And they don't see primary care either. I would actually like to have GP practices on the railway station.
Well, that was where Blair started to close those, didn't he? And
it was a bloody good idea. But GenMed did them privately, didn't they? Right, listen, if this gentleman's got... Now listen, we've waited all evening for this question. It better be good.
Ladies and gentlemen, so my name is Paul Rice. I work for Takeda as the UK GP Federation lead. My question is quite close to home. My daughter has just started working as a staff nurse at Cancer Chester, just down the road from James. And she's on the surgical ward, but there's plenty of people on the beds that are well enough to go home, but they can't because the package is not in place. So if the area became part of the primary care home project, how could those people go home, or even prevent it from happening in the first place?
Will there be a vested interest?
That was a very good question. Well, round of applause for that question. Whilst James gathered his thoughts.
The process of having a responsibility for a budget and aligning incentives would be a vested interest in that. Why would an organisation that is being charged for unnecessary stays, and at the moment the general practice has difficulty in facilitating that discharge because they have no control over social care, they may still only have a GP and a practice nurse to help move that patient back into their home, assess the need in the home, deliver a care package in that home. The primary care home would have the personnel to do that. So if a patient is in a bed that shouldn't be there, and it's costing that organisation on a daily basis at a tariff price of £2,000 a day, they are going to quickly start to compromise their viability if they don't start to deliver something that facilitates their discharge.
Whereas an accountable care organisation, they would really feel it. And that's why the vertical integration of people at the hospital running primary care and the hospital running care homes makes a big difference. Because the care homes, there's one care home a week closing, and 92 domiciliary contracts were handed back in the first part of this year because there's not enough money, they're going broke.
Just say the most celebrated part of accountable care in the US at the moment, and the godfather of the patient-centred medical home, which you may have heard of, is a fellow called Paul Grundy, who's an honorary life member of the NAPC, by the way, but he is saying, we've been doing the primary care, the patient-centred medical home, so the primary care home is way ahead of what we're doing. It is delivering all of the accountable care aspirations of North America at a pace that is outstripping anything we've got in North America at the moment.
Well,
and this was last week. So.
Listen, we've really given it a good old bashing, and thank you for being such a terrific guest. And when's your report out? Well, ask Sally, because you don't know. When's it out?
Imminently.
Imminently, because you don't know either. Will I be having a review copy?
You will have an advance copy, Roy.
Thank you very much.
And all the metrics are in there.
So I'll review it for you and put it online, and you can read all about it in my e-letter when it comes out. 300,000 of you can read my e-letter. We're up to 300,000 now. God knows who you all are, but I'm very grateful to you. And thank you so much for reading it. Hasn't he been a terrific guest? We've been marvellous. Now, hang on, we always give our guests a little gift. It's a tradition. It's the thing that actually fuels most of our decisions. It's a bottle of Welsh.
I'll be buying
whiskey.
another tie now tonight as well.
It's the finest whiskey in the world. It's Welsh whiskey. Any Scots here, eat your heart out. Penderyn is the best whiskey in the world. And I can tell you that there's not a word of my e-letter that is started without a small glass of Penderyn. You've been a fabulous guest. Let's say thank you to James.